Slutar du aldrig att fråga?
Nej.
When the Lamb broke open the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and they were given 7 trumpets.
Picture this. A weary, disillusioned Swedish knight who is struggling with life, death, and faith decides to challenge death himself to a game of chess. Behind all the cynicism and confidence, the knight couldn't be any more terrified for his life. And so, during the hiatuses of this chess game, the knight finds that his homeland in Sweden has been riddled with plague and death. And so, meeting some new companions and friends, the knight is concerned, in a state of being filled to the brim with anxiety. What's going to happen to him? Well, that kind of premise certainly makes for iconic imagery for a starter. I mean, look at it. That's bound to make film history, if anything else. But in all seriousness, there's a reason why this film is revered as one of the pinnacle artistic cinematic movies ever made. This film delves into deeply existential themes that are timeless, and if you were to ask me, I'd say this is one of the key examples of a film that follows the Kierkegaardian philosophy. By Kierkegaardian philosophy, I'm referring to a well-known founding father of existential philosophy called Søren Kierkegaard. Søren Kierkegaard was a Danish philosopher who suggested that our entire state of being is riddled with sin, which he termed as despair. In our despair, we're anxious about death, and we try to do bad things in order to achieve good ends, but that just leads to more despair. We despair of so many things, and he goes into more nuance in his book, The Sickness Unto Death. And yet he provides the cure for anxiety and the fear of death in his book Fear and Trembling, in which he reflects upon the story of Abraham. And Søren Kierkegaard's solution is one that can sound rather strange at first. In fact, when I first heard Kierkegaard's philosophy, I thought it was outright absurd. But once you've been through the struggles of life, Kierkegaard's philosophy makes much more sense. The seventh seal perfectly resembles the Kierkegaardian philosophy of a character, in this case a knight, who is in a state of absolute turmoil in despair. He's struggling with doubt, as well as the after effects of disillusionment from everything he saw from the Crusades. And now he's thinking about his own significance in life, and pretty much anyone's existence in life. And he's quite literally wrestling with death in regards to the outcome of things. And despite all of his apparent schemes and his means of achieving happiness, he finds that he's still suffering from despair. So what's the solution? He seems to get a sample of this happiness he's seeking when he comes across new companions and new friends. That gives him some trace of peace, but where does it all lead to? What does this happiness lead to? Well, without giving too much away, the climax of this film delves into the solution that Søren Kierkegaard himself provided. Trust. Trust is at the center of Kierkegaard's concept of a leap of faith, which is necessary to overcome our death anxiety and to overcome the despair of life. Kierkegaard described this leap of faith as something that goes beyond our finite reasoning. That's why it can seem so overwhelming to even take this leap. But let's be honest here, anyone who's ever had a deep struggle or an existential fear of death, or perhaps a mental health issue, or something that was just so overwhelming, our finite human senses couldn't find a proper solution to it, Kierkegaard says, just take a leap of faith. Take a leap of faith and trust. But trust goes from here to here. But once you embrace trust, which is based on rationality, to be fair, then you'll have that right balance between mind and heart. I'm talking a lot about Kierkegaardian philosophy, and maybe Ingmar Bergman didn't intend that in his film, But whatever the case, this filmmaker has achieved one of the key examples of Kierkegaardian philosophy in film. And this film is just such a brilliant film that the acting is on point, the fantasy elements are amazingly imaginative, there's some wry humor that's quite amusing, there's some brilliant set pieces, and it's all told in what could be described as kind of a brief tale, really, but the topic matter in which it's presented and the visuals that complement these themes are just so evocative and striking. It's no wonder this became an iconic film in history. Like the use of divine visions that some characters have to emphasize certain thematic points, or the way that certain veil-like paintings were used to portray certain themes, or the way people use their sense of theatrical acting or certain customs, which further delves into Kierkegaardian despair and ultimately Kierkegaardian trust. It makes this film kind of a timeless masterpiece, and obviously there's a lot of emphasis on this Bible verse that talks about the seventh seal, specifically the part where God is silent. Now, a lot of people have delved into this deep theme about the silence of God. It's a rather deep and personal issue. In fact, there's an entire story about it called Silence, but I'll be right back. In fact, the silence of God has been discussed in a lot of stories in our culture, not just in the Seventh Seal, but also in Shusaku Endo's Silence, which was later made into a film adaptation by Martin Scorsese. And many would say that this discussion of the silence of God goes even further back, way back when, even before this film was made. I think I remember hearing someone say God is silent for the same reason a teacher is silent during an exam. It's testing you. Ever thought of it that way? Maybe I should get myself more familiarized with Ingmar Bergman's works. There's just some directors who make such an impact to cinematic history, they become a staple name for their respective countries. For Japan, that would be Akira Kurosawa. You've got other names like Guillermo del Toro as well. For Sweden, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. So yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about this film. It's one of the best works of art I've ever seen. I've intended to see this film for some time, but I saw it recently and I'm so glad I did, and I would highly recommend it to anybody. This is one of the most philosophical movies I've ever seen. Philosophical, right up there with The Matrix, The Dark Knight, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and other such films. In fact, I'm fairly glad that the topic of overcoming death anxiety has come back to the mindset of popular culture through Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, because it could invite people to watch this film if they ever get the chance to do so. It's quite an important piece of filmmaking for cinematic history, and at this point I'd be beating a dead horse, so just watch it. I'd highly recommend it. And God bless you all for watching this video. ScotsThinker signing out.
Another angel who had a gold incense burner came and stood at the altar. He was given a lot of incense to add to the prayers of all God's people and to offer it on the gold altar that stands before the throne. The smoke of the burning incense went up with the prayers of God's people from the hands of the angel standing before God. Then the angel took the incense burner, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it on the earth. There are rumblings and peals of thunder, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Then the 7 angels with the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet. Hail and fire mixed with blood came pouring down on the earth. 1/3 of the earth was burnt up, 1/3 of the trees and every blade of green grass. Then the second angel blew his trumpet. Something that looked like a huge mountain on fire was thrown into the sea. 1/3 of the sea was turned into blood. 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. Then the third angel blew his trumpet. A A large star, burning like a torch, dropped from the sky and fell on the third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Bitterness. A third of the water turned bitter, and many people died from drinking the water, because it had turned bitter. Then the fourth angel blew his trumpet. A third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon and a third of the stars, and so that their light lost a third of its brightness. There was no light during a third of the day and a third of the night. Then I looked and heard an eagle that was flying high in the air, saying in a loud voice, "Oh, horror! Horror! How horrible it will be, all who live on earth, when the sound comes from the trumpets that the other three angels must blow."